My name is Thomas Morrison. I'm 67 years old, and on my birthday, my son dumped me at a hospital. He drove away like I was an old piece of furniture. He finally worked up the courage to throw out. What happened next involved a blind stranger, a lie about being his nephew, and an offer that changed everything I thought I knew about family. If you like stories about betrayal, unexpected kindness, and life giving you a second chance when you've lost all hope, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because this one starts in a hospital parking lot with nothing but a small bag at my feet. I never thought my 67th birthday would be the day I learned what my son really thought of me. It was 11 a.m. on a cold Tuesday in March. I was standing outside Toronto General Hospital, my overnight bag at my feet, watching my son drive away in the Mercedes I'd helped him buy 3 years earlier. There was no hug. No, I'll pick you up later. No, happy birthday, Dad. Just a quick glance in the rearview mirror, and then he was gone. That morning over breakfast, my son Marcus had cleared his throat and said, "Dad, we need to talk." My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, stood behind him with her arms crossed, her expression tight, the same look she'd worn most days since I'd moved into their Mississauga home after my heart attack 6 months earlier. "We think it's time you considered other living arrangements," Marcus said. I blinked. "Other living arrangements? I don't understand." Vanessa stepped in, her tone sharp and controlled. "Thomas, we've been patient. We really have. But the kids need their space. Olivia is starting piano lessons and needs the spare room. And honestly, having you here is it's affecting our marriage." I stared at them, stunned. "I help with the mortgage," I said quietly. "I babysit the grandchildren. I barely take up any space." "That's not the point," Marcus snapped, still not looking me in the eye. "You're 67, Dad. Plenty of seniors live independently. We found a nice retirement residence in Scarborough. They have an opening next month." "Next month?" I asked. "Marcus, that's your mother's birthday. I always visit her grave that week." He exploded then. "Jesus, Dad, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You're always living in the past. Mom's been gone 8 years. Meanwhile, Vanessa and I are trying to build a future, and you're just—" He paused, searching for the right words, and then found them. "You're just this weight around our necks." The words hit harder than any heart attack. A weight. I'd worked 2 jobs to put that boy through university when his mother got sick. I'd sold our family home, the one we built so many memories in, to give him $80,000 for his down payment when the Toronto market went insane. And now I was a weight. I just looked at them, my heart sinking. "I see," I managed to say. "When would you like me to leave?" "Today would be good," Vanessa said quickly. "We've already packed your essentials. Marcus can drop you at the hospital for your checkup. And maybe you can stay at a hotel tonight while you figure things out." A hotel, on my pension, in downtown Toronto. It was a sentence, not a suggestion. The car ride was suffocating. Marcus drove, and the entire way he lectured me on the importance of independence, on not being a burden to the younger generation. It wasn't a conversation. It was a justification for what he was about to do. When we pulled up to the hospital entrance, he didn't even get out of the car. He just reached into his wallet and handed me 2 $20 bills. "That should cover a cab," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Text me when you're settled somewhere." Then the Mercedes door closed, and my son, my only child from my second marriage, drove away. On my 67th birthday, I stood there for a long time, the cold March wind biting at my face, the $40 clutched in my hand. I went in for my appointment, got my clean bill of health, and by 3 in the afternoon, I was back on a bench by the ambulance bay. My small bag was at my feet. I had nowhere to go, no one to call. My world had shrunk to this cold, hard bench. That's when a voice beside me said, "Rough day." I looked up and saw an elderly man in a thick wool coat and dark sunglasses. A white cane rested beside him. I had no idea that in the next 5 minutes, this blind stranger would make me an offer that would turn my entire life upside down. And it would start with 5 simple words: pretend to be my nephew. He sat quietly beside me on the hospital bench, his posture ramrod straight despite the cold March wind. His wool coat was rumpled, but expensive, the kind of fabric you only find in upscale boutiques. A pair of dark sunglasses hid his eyes, but something about the set of his jaw told me he missed nothing. "You've been sitting here 20 minutes, he said, his voice surprisingly firm. "I've been here 30. My ride is late, very unusual. But you—" He tilted his head slightly, a gesture of mild curiosity. "You look like you're waiting for something that isn't coming." A bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. That's one way to put it. Family troubles. It was the understatement of the century, but I wasn't about to spill my guts to a stranger. He didn't push. He just sat there patiently, his gloved hands resting on the ornate handle of his cane, waiting for me to continue. And maybe it was the way he spoke, calm, gentle, as if he'd seen more of life than most people could handle. Or maybe it was the fact that I had held everything inside since breakfast and had finally, irrevocably, hit my breaking point. Whatever it was, the dam broke. Suddenly, the whole humiliating truth came pouring out. "My son dropped me off and left," I said, my voice shaking uncontrollably. "I'm 67. Today is my birthday. And I have nowhere to go." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of them. Silence. Then, the man exhaled a slow, deliberate breath, the white puff of air disappearing into the wind. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "That's a terrible thing to happen to anyone, especially on their birthday." We sat like that for another long moment, 2 strangers on a hospital bench, connected by nothing except life's casual cruelty. The world rushed by around us, nurses on their breaks, families visiting loved ones, but in our small space, time seemed to stand still. Then he turned slightly toward me, his movements precise. "My name is William Chun," he said, extending a hand. "And you are?" "Thomas Morrison." I took his hand. His grip was firm, warmer than I expected. "Thomas," he repeated thoughtfully, as if tasting the name. "I'm going to make you a rather unusual offer, and I need to know if you can trust me for the next few minutes at least." I blinked, completely thrown. Trust him? I didn't even know him, but what other options did I have? I suppose so, yes. "Good," he said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "My driver will be here in about 5 minutes. When he arrives, I want you to pretend to be my nephew, the one who helped me with my appointments today." I stared at him, my mind reeling. Was this some kind of joke? A scam? What? Why? "Because," he said calmly, his gaze steady even from behind his sunglasses, "I believe I may be able to help you. But I must assess something first. And sometimes, Thomas, the universe places people exactly where they need to be." He rested a hand on his cane, a gesture of finality. "I've learned to listen when that happens. Will you? What did I have to lose? Hotels were too expensive. My son, my only son, didn't want me. My savings were gone, drained by medical bills and a life that hadn't gone according to plan. And here was a stranger who wasn't offering pity, which I couldn't bear. He was offering a strange, quiet confidence that was both baffling and compelling. "All right," I finally said, the words feeling foreign in my own mouth. He nodded, a slight, knowing gesture, as if he knew the answer before I spoke. "Excellent. And Thomas, when we arrive at my home, follow my lead. Don't act surprised by anything." Before I could respond, a sleek black Cadillac Escalade, gleaming even in the dull afternoon light, pulled up silently to the curb. A driver in a tailored suit stepped out, his movements crisp and professional. "Mr. Chun, my apologies for the delay. The traffic was unusual." "No trouble, Richard," Mr. Chun said, his tone casual, as if this were an everyday occurrence. "Thomas here has been helping me today. My nephew." He gestured toward me. Richard gave me a polite, professional nod, his expression unreadable. "Of course, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Morrison." He opened the heavy rear door, and I stepped inside the luxury SUV, my worn-out shoes sinking into the plush carpeting. I sank into leather softer than anything I'd ever sat on in my life. The door closed with a solid, satisfying thud, sealing us off from the outside world. The smells of rich leather and subtle cologne filled the cabin. As Toronto's gray cityscape slid past the tinted windows, a blur of concrete and steel, I leaned closer to my mysterious benefactor and whispered, "Mr. Chun, where exactly are we going?" "Home," he said simply, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. "Yours?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Ours," he corrected gently. "At least for now." 20 minutes later, we turned into a private road marked by a towering wrought-iron gate. The gate swung open silently, and we drove down a long, winding driveway flanked by perfectly manicured trees. We were in the Bridle Path, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the entire country. The houses, no. The estates were like something out of a magazine, each one more magnificent than the last. I wasn't prepared for what came next. The car pulled to a stop in front of a sprawling modern mansion of glass and stone, a masterpiece of architecture that seemed to rise out of the earth itself. It was more than a house. It was a statement, a declaration of power and wealth beyond my wildest imagination. And nothing not my son abandoning me on a cold hospital bench, nor the crushing loneliness I'd been living in for years, had prepared me for the man sitting beside me, or the truth about who he really was. As we got out of the car and walked toward the massive front door, I had a feeling my life was about to change forever. I just didn't know if it was for the better or for something much, much stranger. We hope you're enjoying the story so far. If you are, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more amazing tailies. Now, let's get back to Thomas and the mysterious Mr. Chun. My fingers trembled as I stared at the folded paper Mr. Chun slid across the table. His tone calm, steady, almost sad, told me this wasn't just important, it was going to hurt. He said gently, "Go on, Thomas. Open it." I unfolded the page. At first, the letters just swam before my eyes. It was a photocopy of a bank statement. My name was at the top, Thomas Morrison Account Summary, but what was below that, my eyes widened in disbelief. Large withdrawals. Transfers I had never made. A savings account that should have held nearly $18,000 showed a balance of $172.09. This can't be right, I murmured, my voice barely a whisper. There must be some kind of mistake. "It's no mistake," Mr. Chun said quietly. The words landed like stones. "Your son has been accessing your account. He used the joint authorization you gave him after your heart attack." The air just vanished from my lungs. I felt lightheaded. He continued, "When you moved into their home, you signed a form at the bank. It was a precaution, wasn't it? In case something happened to you? He told the bank it was for your safety." My voice cracked. How do you know all this?" "Because I know the branch manager," he said simply. "And because 2 months ago, she came to me. She was deeply troubled after seeing the withdrawals. She knew you didn't live the kind of lifestyle that explains thousands of dollars just disappearing." I pressed a hand to my forehead, trying to stop the room from spinning. Marcus, my son, my boy, the child I worked 2 jobs for after his mother died. The teenager I drove across the city for hockey practice every single weekend, no matter how tired I was. The man I proudly handed $80,000 to from the sale of my own home, so he could finally buy his dream house. He had taken everything I had left. My throat tightened, a painful, burning knot. Why? Why would he do that? Mr. Chun tilted his head, a gesture full of a wisdom I was only just beginning to understand. Greed rarely needs a good justification. And your daughter-in-law? He paused, choosing his words carefully. She has been encouraging Marcus to, let's say, accelerate his access to your funds. A bitter, broken laugh escaped my lips. So they kicked me out because you had nothing left to take, Mr. Chun finished for me. The world went sideways. The quiet dignity of his apartment, the smell of old books and tea, it all blurred into a dizzying mess. I tried to stand, to get away from this horrible truth, but he reached out and rested a hand on my arm. For an 80-year-old blind man, his grip was surprisingly strong, steadying. Sit, Thomas, he said, his voice firm but kind. You've stood alone long enough. The old chair creaked as I sank back into it, defeated. Why? I whispered, the question tearing from my raw throat. Why are you helping me? Why did you pretend I'm your nephew? Mr. Chun folded his hands calmly on the table. Because, he said, you remind me of someone I loved very much. Someone who died because no one stepped in when their own family turned cruel. He let out a long, heavy sigh. And because I have lived long enough to recognize a good man when I meet one. He turned his face toward me, his eyes hidden behind the dark glasses, but I felt his gaze all the same. And good men deserve dignity, not hospital benches. Emotion burned hot behind my eyes, threatening to spill over. I swallowed hard against the lump in my throat. Mr. Chun, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything yet, he replied. Just listen. He leaned slightly closer, his presence commanding the space between us. What your son and his wife took from you, it can be recovered. My entire body went still. Every nerve ending tingled. Hope, a feeling I thought was long dead, flickered faintly in my chest. What do you mean? There are legal avenues, he said, his voice measured and precise. Financial ones, moral ones, and perhaps opportunities. The word hung in the air. Opportunities? I repeated, my mind racing. Yes. His voice shifted then, taking on a tone of quiet authority, a hidden strength I hadn't noticed before. It was the voice of a man who knew how the world worked, its dark alleys and its sunlit paths. But before I can help you rebuild, Thomas, I need to know one thing. He paused, letting the silence stretch, forcing me to confront the question he was about to ask. Do you want your life back, Thomas? Or will you accept the scraps your son left for you? I clenched my fists, my knuckles turning white. The worn fabric of my trousers bunched under my grip. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt something inside me finally catch fire. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was something stronger, something sharper. It was resolve. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm, shaking with a strength I didn't know I still had. I want my life back. A slow smile spread across Mr. Chun's face. It was a genuine, knowing smile. Good, he said. Then tomorrow morning, we begin. The gates closed behind us with a heavy, echoing thud. It was the kind of sound that tells you've just entered a place meant for people far richer than you could ever imagine being. The driveway curved through perfectly manicured grounds, lit with these soft, golden path lights that made everything look like a dream. There were flower beds trimmed with military precision, sculpted hedges, and even a sculpture garden. It was the type of property you only ever see on television, the kind you assume doesn't actually exist in real life. And then the house came into view. Honestly, calling it a house felt disrespectful. It was a mansion, sprawling and elegant, easily worth $20 million, maybe even more. Large windows glowed with a warm, inviting light against the gray afternoon sky. I was completely captivated, just staring at it. "Remember," Mr. Chun murmured from the seat next to me, his voice calm but firm. "No surprise." "Right." I tried to nod, forgetting for a moment he couldn't see it. "Okay," I managed to say, but my voice shook, betraying just how overwhelmed I felt. Richard, the driver, opened the SUV door for us, holding it with a silent professionalism that seemed to be the standard around here. Inside, we were met by a woman who looked to be in her 50s. She had this incredibly graceful posture and a flawless bob haircut. She wore an outfit that didn't shout expensive, but whispered it with absolute confidence. Everything about her screamed understated elegance. "Mr. Chun," she said warmly, her voice smooth as silk. "Welcome home." Then her gaze shifted to me, and a polite, questioning look entered her eyes. "And you must be?" Before I could even think of what to say, Mr. Chun stepped in. "This is Thomas," he said, his tone leaving no room for questions. "Hildy's staying with us for a while." The woman who I later learned was named Janet, the house manager, didn't ask a single question. Not one. She just nodded, completely professional and unshaken, as if surprise visitors were a daily occurrence. "Of course, sir," she replied. "I'll prepare the blue guest suite. Thomas, please follow me." I trailed behind her, feeling like a ghost in someone else's life. We walked through a foyer with gleaming marble floors and ceilings so high they seemed to touch the clouds. The walls were adorned with artwork I couldn't name, but I recognized it as the kind that sells in exclusive galleries for hundreds of thousands of dollars. We went upstairs, and she opened a door into a room that was larger than my entire first apartment. I'm not exaggerating. There was a king-sized bed with rich navy blue linens that looked softer than anything I'd ever touched. A comfortable sitting area was arranged by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the grounds. There was a walk-in closet and an ensuite bathroom with a massive soaker tub gleaming under soft, recessed lighting. "Dinner is at 7, Janet said, her voice even and polite. "Unless you'd prefer a tray in your room." "The dining room is fine," I said, though truthfully, I was terrified I'd break something just by breathing too hard. The thought of navigating a formal dinner was almost too much to handle. When she left, I finally allowed myself to sink onto the edge of the impossibly soft bed. I just sat there, trying to process what had just happened. My mind was reeling. 12 hours earlier, I had been living in my son's spare bedroom, feeling like a complete burden, a shadow in his home. Now I was in a room that probably cost more than my entire life savings. Why was this man, this Mr. Chun, helping me? What could he possibly want from me? I was nobody. And what was I supposed to say if anyone asked who I really was? The lie of being his nephew felt heavy and foreign on my tongue. At 7 o'clock sharp, I made my way down to the dining room. It was just as intimidating as I'd feared. A long, polished table was set with sparkling crystal glasses and fine china. Soft classical music played from speakers I couldn't see. Mr. Chun was already there, sitting near the end of the table, his hands folded neatly in front of him. He looked completely at ease, like a king in his castle. "Sit, Thomas," he said, gesturing to a chair opposite him. "Janet tells me you are settled comfortably." I pulled out the heavy chair and sat down, feeling clumsy and out of place. Yes, thank you. It's incredible. But why all of this?" I had to ask. The question was burning inside me. He offered a small, knowing smile. "Because I make it a rule never to ignore what fate puts in front of me." And today, fate placed a man in need of kindness on the same bench where my driver was late for the first time in 5 years. His explanation sounded simple, but it felt like there was so much more beneath the surface. I swallowed hard, trying to process his words. But why me? You don't even know me. He let out a soft chuckle, a sound that was both reassuring and unsettling. That's where you're wrong. I stared at him, my confusion growing. What did he mean by that? He leaned slightly toward me, lowering his voice conspiratorially. The air between us suddenly felt charged. Thomas, I know exactly who you are. I've known your name for much longer than you think. A chill went down my spine. It was a cold, prickling sensation that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. How could he possibly know who I was? We were complete strangers. I asked you to pretend to be my nephew, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper, because sometimes it is easier to protect someone when they have a title that demands respect. My heart started to thud against my ribs, loud and frantic. Protect me? Protect me from what? I whispered, the words barely audible. Mr. Chun lifted his face toward me. The light from the magnificent chandelier overhead reflected off his dark glasses, hiding his eyes completely. It made him impossible to read. From what's coming, he said softly. And from the people who have already taken too much from you. My breath caught in my throat. I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. What was he talking about? What people? He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a single folded piece of paper. He placed it on the polished table and slid it slowly, deliberately, across to me. My eyes were locked on the paper, my hand hesitating to reach for it. Your son and his wife, he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of a terrible truth. They're not who you think they are. And it's time you learned the truth. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus's face, that cold look as he called me a weight around his neck. Each withdrawal on my bank statement felt like a fresh stab wound. How did I become a stranger to my own son? How did it all go so wrong? But as the sun streamed through the window, morning brought something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. At exactly 8 a.m., a soft knock echoed at my guest suite door. Thomas? Mr. Chun's voice drifted in. Breakfast. And then we get to work. I dressed quickly, my hands still shaking slightly, and followed him downstairs. The breakfast room was filled with light, overlooking a garden that seemed to stretch on forever. Janet served eggs, toast, and fruit. It was simple, but prepared with a kindness I hadn't experienced in years. Mr. Chun ate slowly, his movements deliberate. When he finished, he folded his napkin with precision. It's time you learned who I am, he said. I straightened up, my heart caught somewhere between fear and gratitude. He lifted his sunglasses, and for the first time, I saw his eyes. They were clouded, but they weren't empty. They were sharp, intelligent, and held a deep, heartbreaking weariness. My full name, he said, his voice steady, is William Chun Li. The name hit me like a splash of cold water. I stammered, You're the founder of Chun Li Holdings? The real estate group? He offered a small, sad smile. Was, he corrected gently. I handed the reins to my daughter years ago. I spend my time differently now. I just blinked, trying to process it. You're a billionaire. He chuckled softly, a dry, rustling sound. People love numbers. But I've learned that wealth means nothing if it's not used well. The question that had been burning in my mind since yesterday finally escaped. Why me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It all felt so impossible. He set his cane gently on the table, the polished wood gleaming in the sunlight. Because my own nephew used me the way your son has used you. He stole from me, lied to me, abandoned me when my eyesight failed. A faint tremor entered his voice, a crack in his composed exterior. He stole millions. Your son stole thousands. Money isn't the crime, Thomas. The betrayal is. The room fell silent. The weight of his words settled between us, a shared grief that connected two complete strangers. He continued, his voice softer now. When my family turned their backs on me, a stranger helped me. A doctor who knew nothing about me, except that I needed kindness. I swore that if life ever placed someone like me in my path, I would return that debt. He tapped his cane softly on the floor. And yesterday, it placed you. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it difficult to breathe. Mr. Chun, I don't know how to repay you. He shook his head. You already have, he said. You trusted me when you had no reason to. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table toward me. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Inside was a document. At the top, in bold letters, it read, Power of Attorney Revocation and Financial Restoration Plan. And beneath it was a check. A check for $18,000. The exact amount Marcus had drained from my life. My heart hammered against my ribs. I've already contacted an attorney, he said, his tone firm. Your son will receive a notice today. He will repay every dollar he took. I stared at the check, the numbers blurring. You didn't have to do this. Yes, he said, his voice unwavering. I did. And he wasn't finished. Janek will prepare the green suite for a longer stay. You will live here until you find your footing again. No rent, no conditions, just dignity. My voice finally cracked, the dam of emotion I'd been holding back for years beginning to break. Why are you doing all this for me? He smiled then. It wasn't a smile of pity, but one of genuine warmth, gentle, fatherly, and sincere. Because you deserved a birthday where someone remembered you mattered. And with those words, something inside me broke. But it was a good kind of breaking. Tears streamed down my face, hot and unstoppable. And for the first time in so long, I didn't try to hide them. Mr. Chun patted my arm, a gesture of solid, comforting support. Thomas, you are not done. You are not a burden. You are not alone. I could only nod, unable to speak past the gratitude and relief choking me. He stood slowly, his cane tapping once on the floor, a sound of finality and new beginnings. And now, he said, his voice resonating with purpose, let's go reclaim your life. Thank you for watching. If you were moved by this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that reminds us of the power of kindness and second chances. We'll see you in the next video.